Hello, this video is about using whole class feedback sheets. Whole class feedback sheets is a technique that will definitely reduce teacher workload and still allow us to provide high quality feedback to support the learning of our students. The technique's very simple. First thing we would need to do is to read through the student work and on a scrap piece of paper just make notes on the things they've done well, what errors commonly occur, and any other worthy points you'd want to share with them. Once you've done that, you need to compile it into a student-friendly template. I've got some examples of what that might look like in a little second. And then you need to think about how you would support the students to respond to that feedback. Now, this is a highly adaptable technique. The feedback sheets themselves will look different in different departments, will look different on different topics. And to be honest, you probably want to focus in on providing these feedback sheets to specific tasks. Whatever you're looking at will probably have a range of different sections from the list below. So you'll want to highlight possibly the misconceptions or the mistakes the students have been making, any extension tasks, any new information you want to provide them that's going to help them learn more, any work that's worthy of praise, any concerns you have about the quality of the student work, any advice you'd give them, any models of good work, key vocabulary for spelling purposes and for embellishing work, and definitely a section where you'd want the students to go off and do something, the actions, the improvements that they could then make. So here's an example from a history classroom. You can see, directly that it can be used for classroom management. So who's doing well, who's doing less well. There's some motivation to move from one section to the other, I would imagine. Think about the time you would save in terms of writing a U next to every underlined, non-underlined title. Even if it's just one letter and it's in 30 books and there's several pages that you've checked, get the students to check that, and the students then learn to manage their own books. There's a section for follow-up tasks. This teacher's been very supportive. It's clear that the teacher has discussed the gaps that the students had that you've seen as they've assessed the work, and then provided a knowledge organizer or some extra information to support the students in responding. So here's an example of a student book. You can see the sheet's being shared with the individual student. The task has been written onto that sheet, but then there's been support available to allow that student to respond in that amount of detail. You can see they've revisited those ideas to improve their learning. This example is from an MFL teacher. So there's an opportunity for specific praise. So that could be individuals or just things that the students in general got right. The improvements are beginning to be focused now in the EBI section. There's a misconception section there where the teacher can give some explanation of why misconceptions are wrong and how to put them right. There's some specific points that can be that need to be addressed by the individual students, and then there's a scaffold to help them structure their response. Overall, I really like this approach because it's got that step-by-step, which means it's much easier for the students to act upon that feedback. Here's an example from science. So with support, it's clear that the students will be able to check through their own work using these checklists. So if you look at the thinking like a chemist section, the students could find the relevant parts in their books and just tick if they've done it. And anything that is missing, they've now got a target to then act upon. There's a chance for praise in this example too. And there's some very definite actionable points in the next step section. However, it's not clear to me if this applies to every single student in the class, or do students need to be able to work out what parts apply to those, to them personally. So I'm just pondering on the quality of this one. I'm not sure if there's too much information here, and I'm not sure if it's directing enough for the students to be able to take action independently. So to overcome that, here's a couple of examples. So you'll see the structure is very similar here. There's some praise, some specific praise of the things that the students have done well. And this was just a series of exam questions, basically, the students had done for homework. And I just used the code. So if the students had struggled on question 5B, I just put a 5B in a square next to their work, and then they got some very specific step-by-step guidance of how to improve or complete that particular question. So the structure of the task itself has led to the structure of the feedback sheet. Here's another example. This was a bit of extended writing I did with some Year 10 students. At the top, where it says internal energy here, that's the bottom of some extra information I provided that would make their response better. They would get them to revisit the ideas. And there was only 5 actionable points, and as I went through the books, I wrote down where the errors were, and then on the student work, if they needed to add where the energy transfer was, I just wrote a letter A in the position where they would need to add that information. If they needed to describe the motion of the particles, I would have wrote B2 next to the section where they would need to add that. So it was clear where and what the students needed to do. Here's just another example I liked, for the fact that it included an exemplar in the middle, although I would have preferred the praise section to be unpicking what was good about this one. But that's a nice idea generally. If we can include an example of what is a good example of the work that you're after, students are more likely to be able to emulate it. Again, we can possibly question the clarity of what the students need to do in terms of the feedback here, but I really do like this knowledge section in blue in terms of supporting the students, deepening their understanding of the work that they've just done. So, in summary, what makes good practice with whole class feedback? So the feedback needs to be timely, and I think this is the benefit of whole class feedback generally, is that it is a much quicker process, and therefore the students can get the feedback quicker than if you had to mark the 30 books individually. The feedback is structured in a way that supports students' work more independently. So once you've set them off, they should be able to then continue through the lesson or the improvement session. So to do that, we'd need to say where they are now, what they should focus on, and give them some guidance and specific feedback that is actionable. It's still really important that the feedback makes the students think again about the content. To do that, we may need to think about further teaching, further explanations, and materials and tasks to help them do that.